good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January meeting of the League of Women Voters of Carrollton, Carroll County. And we were delighted to have Melissa Delisle, who is joining us on behalf of Better Ballot, Georgia, where she has been a volunteer since late 2020. Melinda has been an advocate of women's concerns for many years, including pregnancy health, homeschooling rights, and maternal mortality. Career-wise, Melinda is a clinical nutritionist specializing in pregnancy health and has helped run the team building company she co-owns with her husband for the last 12 years. So we are looking forward to learning about better ballots and instant runoff voting this evening. So Melinda, I'm going to mute myself and turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Martha. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that certain things are just very hard to explain without getting some visuals on them. So we're going to go ahead and do that here. All right, so what we've got here is tonight we're going to talk about instant runoff voting. You may have heard about this in the national news as ranked choice voting. For the purposes of what we're talking about in Georgia, they are basically interchangeable. There are things that you can talk about with slight differences, but we're just going to talk about the general concept of what is instant runoff voting, sometimes called ranked choice voting, and what might it mean for how it could change how things work, here in Georgia. So first of all, what I'd really like to know is, do you have, those of you who are here on the Zoom, do you have some current frustrations with the way that elections work in Georgia? If you can go ahead and pop that in the chat, that would be awesome. And I'm going to see if I can get myself to see the chat. So usually the kinds of things that I see here, obviously we can't talk about things like ballot access or that kind of thing, but we can talk about some of the other things that often come up, which is, not having a lot of choices, having to keep going back to the polls over and over and over and over because we've had so much fun with that in the last few years. So it looks like we're going to go ahead and go on a little bit. Oops. So first, a little bit about Better Ballot Georgia. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is 501c3. We're 100% volunteer run. And our goal is to try to help educate the public about instant runoff voting and possibly at some point other ways that ballots can be improved and to benefit the public. All right, so I'm here and you've learned a little bit about me. That's actually one time I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. To do some lobbying for maternal mortality and some of those changes that have been coming about in Georgia and the studies that they've been doing, improvements they're trying to make, actually directly came out of the work that we were doing that day. So I was pretty happy about that. All right, so one thing that I would like to do, one of the best ways to understand the differences between an instant runoff vote and standard voting is to actually try it. Okay, so those of you who are watching live stream on Facebook can participate in this as well. Basically, we're going to do two votes. Right now, we're going to real briefly do a quick vote about, we're going to pretend we're at some kind of meeting. We're going to a conference or a business meeting. They're trying to plan what kind of fruit we're going to have for a snack, but we can only have one type of fruit. And each person, of course, you want to try to make sure that the type of fruit that you want is available, and you can only have one vote. So this is the way that most people would vote for most things. And if you go to this URL, which I will see if I can pop in the chat here. You could pick one of these, put your vote in, and you will be able to have your voice be heard in regard to what fruit we will have at this fictitious meeting. So they're in the chat, and I don't know if there's a way to actually post those on the live stream as well. Give everybody a moment to go to that URL, put in the vote, and we are going to go on to talk about, what are some of the problems with the way that elections currently run in Georgia? I'm sure we can agree that there are lots of issues, including problems with non-majority winners in some elections. There are some elections in Georgia, pretty much we're only talking about like the primaries, presidential general election, some of that kind of thing, where you can have somebody win and they did not get over 50% of the vote. Vote splitting and strategic voting, people trying to figure out who's going to be the best one to have the chance of winning instead of voting for who they want to win. Limited voter choice, especially during a runoff. People feeling unrepresented by the candidates that wind up winning. Negativity and hyperpartisanship. Maintaining the status quo that is dictated by a small percentage of the population, and costly and time-consuming runoffs. We're going to go into more detail on a lot of these. Yes, we know that there are other issues. Okay, I'm not saying that these are the only problems with the current electoral system. They're just the ones we're going to address because they're the ones that we can actually be impacted by instant runoff voting. So, election structure. So depending on how much you know or don't know about how the electoral system works, you may be familiar with the term plurality voting. Basically, that means that whoever gets the most votes in an election wins. And if you have a lot of candidates running, that most votes could wind up being 40% or 30%, or if you had a lot of candidates, even 20% or less. As long as somebody has more than any other candidate, more votes than any other candidate, they would win. It's sometimes called winner takes all. It does mean that most people voted for somebody who did not win. This, of course, can cause a large percentage of voters to feel like they're not represented by the candidate that won. It can also lead to something called vote splitting, where there's arguments about certain candidates should or shouldn't run because they're taking away votes from other candidates. And they're splitting the vote because similar candidates could wind up, even though more of the population agrees with them, they could wind up not winning because they have to pick one of those two instead of everybody coalescing behind one candidate. There's also the issue of spoilers. And sometimes there's a term that's used called being primaried, where we see this a lot in primary elections. And you can have who might have been the most popular choice not win because of this whole plurality voting, vote splitting, and all of that. It's sometimes a complex concept, but it is a problem. So winner takes all, the more people we have, the worse the problem gets. Now, voter choice is another issue that we've got. Now, you can give a show of hands or not. I will just say that from the people that I know, and I try really hard to know people on all parts of the political spectrum. Okay, it's just something I value because I want to understand different perspectives. And out of most people I know, whether they were on the right or on the left or in the middle, most of them in the 2020 election were not happy with their candidate. Most of them did not like the person that they had running. And a lot of them really would have preferred somebody else, but that wasn't what we wound up getting. And there actually was somebody else, but we had the third party. This was the spoiler effect. Whether or not you considered voting for Libertarian Jo Jorgensen, there are people who did. And I will say that there are people I know, again, on both sides, but in this case, mostly Republicans. It's more Green Party that you tend to get this sentiment from Democrats, that were very angry with people who voted for Libertarian Jo Jorgensen. I'm sorry, but that's not right. People should be able to vote for who their conscience believes would be the best candidate without having to worry about people being angry because it's taking votes away from another party. But that's something that's a creation of the system that we currently have. All right, so we do have runoffs. We have runoffs a lot in Georgia. Actually, it's getting more and more frequent as time goes on, and as we wind up having more people in the middle, or more variation in opinions, which I think is a good thing, by the way. So what happens is there is a thing that happens with wasted votes. Okay, runoffs do create wasted votes. If people have to vote early, this is actually an issue with SB 202, is if people have to vote early, especially in the primary, the candidate that they voted for with a one vote system, it creates a problem of, if the person that they wanted drops out before the primary, then that vote is wasted. 2 million wasted votes on Super Tuesday. That's a lot. Those people are not having their vote counted because they had to, for whatever reason, submit their ballot for the primary early. They're not getting heard, and because those candidates dropped out. Another issue we have is voter apathy. Because of the things that happen with candidates dropping out, because people are not satisfied with the candidates that are running. A lot of them, and I know some of these people very personally, they just don't bother. They're like, why should I bother participating? And as we know, democracy needs participation to work. The people participate in a democracy, that's when we can have more voices heard. But if people are feeling like they're not going to be heard anyway, then they don't care and they're not participating. Now, coming back to runoffs. One of the biggest issues, not the only issue, but one of the biggest issues with runoffs is the cost. And so the January 2020 election, the runoff election, cost Georgia taxpayers a lot. Fulton County alone, we were able to get these numbers. They spent over $6 million, not on the entire election cycle, just on the January 5th runoff. And that's just one county out of 51 counties in Georgia. That's a lot of cost, a lot of taxpayer money that could be put towards much better purposes. Additionally, there's a big issue with voter turnout. Runoff elections. Now, I will say that January 5th in 2021, with the 2020 election cycle, was an exception. Okay, I believe, if I remember the data correctly, that there were more people that turned out at that election than any other runoff in Georgia history, and possibly more than the original election. But with most runoffs, there's a decline of somewhere between 30 and 40% fewer people come out the second time. There's a lot of reasons for this. Might be that people don't know about it, might be they can't get there. One of, actually, I believe it's the president, our current president of Better Ballot Georgia, shares a story when he was out at one of our canvassing events of speaking to a voter who's in a wheelchair. And he talked about how challenging it is for him to get out to the polls once, let alone the second time for a runoff, because of the challenges of getting there, of, what if it's raining? It's more of a hassle for him. Some people have to have challenges with childcare or work. So voter turnout, this is a real problem. And what is not seen on this graph, but I have seen data on, is there is a greater drop-off in voters of color turning out for runoff elections, and other types of disadvantage or types of disadvantaged voters. They're less likely to come out for the runoff. This can really skew the results of an election because you're getting really just a subset of the electorate instead of the entire electorate. The other thing is this, of course, makes the game for the candidates all about who can they get to actually show up instead of who's the better candidate. Now, civility. Who here really likes watching campaign ads? Anybody? No. Believe it is not your imagination at all. Campaign ads are getting worse and worse and worse, more and more negative, more muckraking, more polarization. It has gotten to an insane point that during that, again, 2020 election cycle gave us a lot of great examples. Between the general election and the runoff, there were over 500 or about 500 unique ads. About 70% of them were negative. And some of those ads ran over 300 times a day. So we're being deluged with this negativity, with this hyperpartisanship, with this, those people are evil or that guy is evil. And this can only serve to create discord. It definitely doesn't bring anybody together. All right, so the primaries, we've got an issue of there's a lot fewer voters at the primaries. And in districts where you have mostly a single type of voter, when we're talking two-party system, mostly Democrat or mostly Republican, it means that those smaller number of people that showed up at the primaries are actually the ones who are deciding the general election. In Georgia, typically we have fewer than 1/3 of voters show up at primaries. And that is not a lot of people. Now we're talking about less than 1/3 deciding how that election is going to turn out months later. All right, so instant runoff voting, also called ranked choice voting. Yes, it's been used other places, usually called ranked choice voting, but in most other states where they're talking about it as ranked choice, they don't already have runoffs. Okay, believe it or not, that's actually a good thing that we have runoffs. There's some mixed issues around it, but we won't get into that right now. So instant runoff voting can solve a lot of these. So what is it? Basically, it is the same idea as what you do when you rank your favorite sports teams, wines, TV shows, songs, anything where you would put something in order and say, I like this best, that second, that third. That's instant runoff voting. That's it. It's that easy. You decide which candidate you like best, who would you most prefer after that, and so on down for as many choices as you either want to pick or the ballot allows. That would depend on what the law says. And you select those candidates on your ballot. So how it gets tallied up is a little bit interesting. We're actually going to go ahead and try this as well. So first time they go ahead and tally everybody's first choices. Does any candidate have majority? If yes, we've got a majority winner, works just like any other election, we're done. Probably from the data they've got so far, about 2/3 of the time. It just works this way. Count up first choices. Somebody's got a majority, and that's 50% plus one in most laws for instant runoff voting. And they're done. Where it gets interesting and where the benefit really comes in is if that's not the case. In Georgia, if no candidate had a clear majority, we would usually go to a runoff at this point. Okay. But with an instant runoff ballot, what they do is they eliminate the candidate that had the fewest votes. So if candidate C had the fewest votes, that one goes away. All of those votes for that candidate then get counted towards those voters' next choice. Now, if it sounds confusing, don't worry. We'll work on, give another example of this here in a moment. Then they retally the votes. So most people still have their first choice counted. People who had picked the candidate with the fewest votes, those people, that counts their second choice. Then they retally, see if there's a majority. Yes, we're done. No, they do the same thing again. And just keep going through that cycle until you get to a point where somebody has a 50% plus one majority. So how does it work? Oh, you know, I'm going to have to stop sharing for just a second because I forgot to share with sound, and I want to make sure that we get this video to have sound for you. So, all right. So give me a thumbs up if you are able to hear this.
Pick your favorite color.
The ranked choice voting way.
Instead of voting for just one color, you get to rank your top 3.
Well, purple is the best, but if I can't have purple, I want blue. And if neither of those wins, I guess I can live with orange.
Now, let's count up everybody's votes.
Under ranked choice voting rules, it's not enough just to get the most votes. You need a majority.
More than 50% of the votes.
Purple's ahead, but it has only 7 votes.
It needs at least 11 to win.
So we eliminate the color in last place.
Sorry, orange fans, we're going to your second choice.
2 more for green.
1 for purple.
But no color has 11 votes yet.
Still no majority.
Bye-bye,
blue.
1 more for purple.
4 for green.
And we have a winner.
The ranked choice voting way.
All right. So that's it. That's how it works. All of that would be transparent. They would have to release every round to the public and how it works. Now, this is an actual round tally from a Santa Fe mayoral election in 2018, where you can see how it worked. In round 1, nobody had a majority. Alan Weber had close to 40%, but definitely not over half. So they got rid of Peter Ives. Those voters had their votes counted, pushed up a bunch of the other candidates. Same thing happened. They got rid of Joseph Mestesas, and they kept doing that until it wound up that Alan Weber did win with an overwhelming majority of 2/3. So if we want to go ahead and back up to our little vote for our fruit at the meeting, same thing. We can only have one type of fruit. But instead of only being able to pick one, you can rank the fruits in order of preference. So we've got a different URL this time, and we should be able to pop that in the chat for those that are on the live Zoom. And everybody else, hopefully that is short enough to be able to type it in. Go ahead and do a quick vote. You can rank as many or as few of the fruits as you like. Just, put them in your order of preference. That is bit.ly/IRV-fruit. And you guys can go ahead and do that while I go on let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits of instant runoff voting. You always guarantee, with instant runoff voting, you guarantee majority winners, because that's the definition, is you have to keep going through the rounds until you have 50% plus one or better. You eliminate the spoiler effect. There's more candidate choices because people are encouraged to run because there's more chance of them actually being able to impact the outcome or win. They've found that there's greater voter turnout because people feel like there's more representation. Campaigns tend to be more civil. There's less partisanship. There are, interestingly, more minority and women representatives that get elected, and you get rid of costly runoffs. Now, so here you can see that there's no spoiler effect. In this election that we had looked at a few minutes ago, if they had done it plurality, Alan Weber would have won. All right. But since they had to go until there was a majority, we could see that most people did wind up agreeing, at least as their last ditch choice, that Alan Weber was their option. And it didn't matter that the votes were split up so much in that first round. It just didn't make a difference because everybody had a second choice. You could see this also. We'll just click through these pretty quickly. This kind of shows in order, first round, and they eliminate that first one. Okay, a few more rounds go by. This was in Oakland in 2010. Oakland's been using ranked choice voting for quite some time. And you keep going. You could see the new colors that get tacked on the end are the votes that were added each round. And that continues until you end up with Jean Quan winning, who had not been the winner if they had stuck with plurality. If they had done it as that whoever gets the most votes in the first round wins, that would have been Don Parada. But because of all the different rounds, it wound up being Jean Quan, because Rebecca Kaplan, again, see, this is the effect of that vote splitting. Jean Quan and Rebecca Kaplan split the votes. But when you got rid of Rebecca Kaplan, because she still hadn't gotten enough votes, most of those people preferred Jean Quan over Don Parada. So you can see how that gets rid of that whole spoiler effect. And there's how the rounds played out all at once. So they did find, this was a study done by University of Missouri, St. Louis, that there was about a 10-point increase in voter turnout when they instituted ranked choice voting versus before the ranked choice voting. It did not change the general election, but it did change a lot of the number of people that showed up. Some people are concerned that ranking your choices is complex and that people don't understand it. But the studies that have been done show that overwhelmingly people do understand it and they do use it. So close to 90% ranked multiple candidates, and also close to 90%, ranked multiple candidates for mayor. And in New York City, you may have heard about this last summer, New York City used ranked choice voting in their mayoral primary. In the United States, that's the biggest use of instant runoff ranked choice voting so far. It is not the biggest use in the world that we'll talk about, later, but over 80% of those ranked more than one candidate, and 75% would like to use it again. So lots of people really like how it works. So how does it impact all that campaign negativity? Well, candidates are no longer just trying to go against the other guy. They now really have to think about, are they your second choice or your third choice? So who wants to vote for the negative person who's always, pointing fingers at everybody else if there's another option? When there's not another option, people will go to the negativity. because that's the lesser of two evils. But as they've found in Minneapolis, in Oakland, that they had to think about being the second choice. So they have to be more civil. They have to be more focused on the issues instead of on character. You have to talk to everybody. And it changes the way they run campaigns. This is a wonderful thing for us, the people. So I mentioned briefly that there seemed to be a greater percentage of minority representatives. And this is what happened in California. This was in California after they did a study of before they instituted the option for cities to decide to use ranked choice voting versus after, and cities who did versus cities who didn't. In cities that decided to use rankings instead of single vote, they had 60% of people of color wound up winning an office versus 41% before, or only a slight change, 46% in those cities that did not adopt ranked choice voting. Now, what's really interesting is that the new data with ranked choice voting, those representatives and the pool of those representatives tends to more closely resemble their constituents. The pool of voters is more closely resembled by the ranked choice voting elected officials than by those previous to that. Same thing happened with women. Is on city councils before ranked choice voting, overwhelmingly men were representatives on city councils. After ranked choice voting, it became about an even 50-50 split. And what is a population? Pretty close to an even 50-50 split for men and women. This is just another way of looking at that data, looking at it by the cities that have used ranked choice voting versus the national average. National average of women representatives on city councils are about 25, not even quite 30%. But in those with ranked choice voting, much, much higher. So there's lots of organizations that are already in support of instant runoff voting. Many colleges and universities are using it, including right here in Georgia State University is using it with their student councils, and over 90 other universities. And that was last count. It's probably gone up by then, but that data is from about a year ago. Many politically active organizations are supportive of that, of instant runoff voting, nonpartisan organizations, and it's used in other places around the world. In the United States, actually, this is the old graph. There's actually a new one that has more states filled in because Georgia should be orange. We'll talk about that in a moment. But there's more than half of states have some form of ranked choice or instant runoff voting that has been enacted or used. New York City has used it. And in Georgia, now, okay, I know this is a hot button topic. Okay, SB 202 is a hot button topic, and I'm not talking about the rest of the law. We're only talking about the provision for using instant runoff voting in overseas ballots. It is not an ideal way to use it. We're not going to talk about the reasons why they're using it, but it is the first step. It's a first step that says this is a valid way to let voters rank their choices and use that instead of having to come back for a runoff. It is what allowed us to shorten the runoff period to 4 weeks in the fall and do it on November 30th instead of having to wait. in Georgia currently, other than that military and absentee voters ballot, their cities can't choose to use instant runoff voting. The General Assembly has to pass a law in order to allow cities the option to use it. There was a bill that was attempted in 2021, but it was dropped because of HB 202. Now there are some cities that are starting to pass resolutions that they would want to use it if they could. City of Atlanta, which is pretty progressive, Johns Creek, which is pretty conservative, both have passed resolutions saying that they are very interested in the option of being able to use instant runoff voting. And they would love for the Georgia legislature to pass a law to do that. Now, I can let you in on a little bit of a rumor here that we understand that there is a bill that's supposed to be introduced to this session that would give cities the option, cities and counties, so local municipal elections, the option to use instant runoff voting if they wanted to do so. That's kind of important because in this 2021 election, pretty much universally, the only positions that were up for election were city councils, county commissioners, board of education, those municipal elections. And while there weren't a lot of runoffs, there were some. Okay, in my hometown of Roswell, we had one runoff. We had our vote for one of the city council posts was split. And out of our, was it 4 or 5, I think, municipal elections, one of those was not decided by 50% plus one. And we had to run a whole entire runoff election for one position. I don't know how much it costs. I'm going to have to pester them about that, but I can think of a lot of other things I really wish they would have been able to use that money for instead. So we're going to get more details on this from at least one of the legislators that is sponsoring, or no, one of the former legislators who's working with current legislators on the bill. Somebody who's in the know, we'll say that. Thursday at 7 p.m. on Zoom at our Better Ballot Georgia statewide meeting, we're going to get more details. And unfortunately, this is a long URL that I will try to drop in the chat. I might have to do that once we get through this because I want to be able to get to questions here. But definitely, if you want to just go to betterballotgeorgia.org and then click on our calendar, you'll be able to see the statewide meeting there. And that'll be the easiest way to get to registration for the meeting. So there are other electoral problems. We're not talking about gerrymandering. I wish instant runoff voting would solve that, but it won't. Won't have any impact. Won't solve ballot access, unfortunately. It doesn't change some of those other issues with primaries. But what it does is instant runoff voting starts getting a foot in the door. Okay. As any of you who are politically active know, or politically informed know, it's really hard to get certain kinds of reforms passed. Instant runoff voting is one that there are a wide variety of people from the far left to the far right and everybody in between that can agree, not everybody, but a vast majority, once they understand it, can agree that instant runoff voting is beneficial to the voters. And that starts opening other doors for being able to get other reforms passed so that there can be more fairness and more actual voice of the people and all those voices that need to be heard. All right, so I'm going to need to take a peek here, see what our results are. So first we need to look at, Trying to find where my results are here. So for our single vote, we had 11 people vote, decent number. We had pineapple won. When people had to pick just one, pineapple was our winner. All right. Now, if we do this with the ranked choice votes, let's see what happened. Okay. There were a couple of votes left over from a previous test, but if we look at it, we had 15 votes in 4 rounds. So let's see what happened by round. We actually wound up with watermelon winning. The first round, pineapple and watermelon were close. And it wound up as we eliminated apples and then bananas and then eliminated pineapple. Pineapple won in the single choice, but it got eliminated in this instant runoff round. Then it wound up that more people chose watermelon. So you see how when people are thinking about ranking, it changes how you select your candidates. Instead of voting for, well, what do I think is the most likely to win? You start thinking about, what do I really want? What do I really think is the best option? And I don't know about you, but I think that is we need a lot more of that in Georgia, of what is really the best option? What's really going to be the best for us as the people? Not who am I okay with as long as that other guy doesn't get in. And that's really what we want to look at, is how can we get more positivity, more results, and better overall benefit for us, the voters. That's a recap of those benefits we talked about. And I really do hope that you are willing to help us out, that you could see the benefit. You don't have to give a lot of help. We don't need everybody to do a lot. But there are some quick and easy ways you can help. I know, I see they would choose something other than blueberries. It might be those leftover votes, okay? It might be the fault of the last time I did this presentation. So if you're open to, if you see the value of instant runoff voting and you would like municipalities in Georgia to at least have that option, go ahead and sign our petition, please. We're using that to help the legislators see that there are people who are interested in this. You're, of course, able to join us as a volunteer or a donor. We always, like every organization, we always need more volunteers and donors. If you just want to learn more, whether you're not sure or you think it's valuable, or you just want to find out a little bit more about what this is all about, come to our statewide meeting on Thursday. Go to, betterballotgeorgia.org and go to the calendar and register for our statewide meeting. Hear more details about how it's all happening. And if you know another organization or important people, elected officials who might be interested in learning more about instant runoff voting or having a presentation like this or a shorter one, we do them as short as 5 to 10 minutes, please connect us. And with that said, then I would love to go ahead and take questions. So while people are thinking about sticking questions in the chat, I'm going to scroll back up through real quick and see if there's any questions I need to answer. Okay, so we might talk a little bit more about SB 202 if needed. And yes, I see poll workers do tend to be frustrated by runoffs, and I think the expense really is unnecessary. Yes, letters to the editor. So there was a comment in the chat that one way that we can impact is to write letters to the editor, and letters to the editor are a wonderful way to help educate people. have had some campaigns of that, and it doesn't just have to be the president of the league. It can be anybody. Now, of course, the more influential somebody is, the more impact they're going to have. We do have a sample letter, so let me go ahead and pop my email into the chat here. Make sure I've got the right one. I'm one of those people that has way too many email addresses, so give me 1 second. Okay. So my email address is Melinda, D, MELINDA, and the letter D at betterballotgeorgia.org. You can email me and I can send you a sample letter. Another great thing that anybody can do is you can just send a quick email note to your city council or county commissioners and just ask for them to learn more. You know, say you've heard there's some benefits and you'd like them to learn more. And if they respond positively, you can connect them with us and then we can pick it up from there. We actually, some other members of Better Ballot Georgia did a presentation to one of the Metro Atlanta County commissions just a couple days ago, you know, when they're looking at possibly doing a resolution. So there any other questions that anyone would like to ask? No? All right. Well, with that, I'll stop sharing. And if there's anything that Martha or any of the rest of you would like to say, then I'll turn it back over to you.
None of you have any more questions for Melinda?
It's not a question, it's just an observation I have, that I think it's similar to what the league does when we are reaching a decision and we look for consensus. And this is a way of getting consensus on who we think is the best candidate for the job.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, that it is a way of coming to consensus. There are a few other ways to do it. This one seems to be the most approachable to legislators because they have their own ideas of self-preservation. But it is definitely a way to help see who more people are willing to stand behind and come to that, closer to that consensus.
Any other comments?
It's going to cut out the money to the PACs because they're the ones that do all the negative ads, though. They're going to have to get more positive.
Well, what they're finding in other areas that use ranked choice voting is that it forces them to focus on the issues. And instead of being able to just pull up, oh, so-and-so did such and such, they have to say, our candidate stands for such and such on this issue. And that, while requiring a little bit more thought of the voters, I think is valuable because it lets us really understand what a candidate stands for instead of just their character or what they tell us their character is.
It seems like for some voters, it might be easy to pick out who their first choice is, but they would have to study in order to pick out who their second and third choice is.
That is a good point, and that is, while I think that's a good thing, there are those that see that as an impediment. And here's the thing, is that no one's forcing anyone to choose or rank multiple candidates. If someone really just wants to vote the way they've always voted, they can. They still have the ability to just pick one person, whoever their favorite is, and leave the rest blank. So no one's taking away the ability to vote the way they currently vote. We're giving the option for more people to be able to learn more about the candidates, to be able to learn more about the issues, and to be able to pick one of those maybe lesser known candidates that you really think would be the best for the job, but probably doesn't have much chance of winning. And you never know.
Melinda, we certainly do thank you for being with us. And I'm sure we'll be doing some more talking about this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And like I said, feel free to reach out. Our website is betterballotgeorgia.org. And if you want to email me directly, I'm melindad@betterballotgeorgia.org.